this video playlist. I'm reading today the chronology of the church history from the Book of Mormon, starting at Joseph Smith's birthday, which was in 1805. He did die in 1844. Anyway, he was born on December 23rd, 1805. He was born to Joseph Smith Sr. and Lucy Mack Smith in Sharon, Vermont. In early spring of 1820, the prophet Joseph Smith received the first vision in a grove of trees in Palmyra and Manchester Township, New York. It was near his home. In September 1823, on September 21st and 22nd, Joseph Smith was visited by an angel Moroni and told of the Book of Mormon record. Joseph viewed the gold plates buried in a nearby hill, the hill of Cumorah. On September 22nd, 1827, Joseph Smith obtained the gold plates from Moroni at the hill Cumorah. On May 15th, 1829, John the Baptist conferred the Aaronic priesthood on Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery in Harmony, Pennsylvania. In May of 1829, Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery received the Melchizedek priesthood from Peter, James, and John near the Susquehanna River between Harmony, Pennsylvania, and Colesville, New York. You can read about that in Doctrine and Covenants 128, line 20. In June of 1829, the translation of the Book of Mormon was completed, and the 3 witnesses and the 8 witnesses shown the gold plates. On March 26, 1830, the first printed copies of the Book of Mormon became available in Palmyra, New York. On April 6, 1830, the church organized in Fayette Township, New York. September through October 1830, the first missionaries were called to preach to the Lamanites, which are the Native Americans. In December 1830 and January of 1831, the saints were commanded to gather in Ohio. On July 20th, 1831, the site for the city of Zion, which is the New Jerusalem, was made in Independence, Missouri, and was revealed to the prophet Joseph Smith. On March 18, 1833, Sidney Rigdon and Frederick G. Williams, set apart as counselors in the presidency of the church, were given keys of this last kingdom. On November 7, 1833, saints began fleeing from the mobs in Jackson County, Missouri. They fled across the Missouri River into Clay County. On May 5th, 1834, President Joseph Smith left Kirtland, Ohio for Missouri as a leader of Zion's camp to bring relief to the saints that were expelled from Jackson County. On Valentine's Day, 1835, February 14th, the Quorum of the 12 Apostles organized in Kirtland, Ohio. February 28th, 1835, the organization of the first Quorum of the 70 commenced in Kirtland, Ohio. August 17th, 1835, Doctrine and Covenants accepted as a standard work of the church, Kirtland, Ohio. March 27th, 1836, the Kirtland Temple was dedicated. On April 3rd, 1836, Jesus Christ appeared to Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery in the Kirtland Temple. Moses, Elijah, and Elijah appeared and conveyed the priesthood keys. Read about that in Doctrine and Covenants 110. On July 19th, 1837, Heber C. Kimball and 6 others arrived in Liverpool, England on the church's first overseas mission. April 26, 1838, the name of the church specified by Revelation in D&C 115.4. On December 1st, 1838, the prophet Joseph Smith and others were imprisoned in Liberty Jail, Liberty in Clay County, Missouri. On August 15th, 1840, baptism for the dead was publicly announced by the prophet Joseph Smith. On October 24th, 1841, the elder Orson Hyde dedicated the Holy Land for the return of the children of Abraham. On March 17th, 1842, there was a female relief society organized in Navajo, Illinois. May 4th, 1842, first and full temple endowments were given. June 27th, 1844, Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith were martyred. They died in Carthage jail. They died in jail. You can read about that. D&C 135. On February 4th, 1846, the Navajo Saints began crossing the Mississippi River to move west. Some of the Eastern Saints sailed from New York City for California on the ship Brooklyn. Go all the way around. All right, 1846, on July 16th, the Mormon Battalion mustered into the U.S. service in Iowa. On April 1847, the President Brigham Young Pioneer Company left winter quarters on the journey westward. July 24th, 1847, President Brigham Young entered Salt Lake Valley. On December 27th, 1847, the Church Conference sustained President Brigham Young, Elder Heber C. Kimball, and Elder Willard Richards as the first presidency. 1848, between May and June, there was crickets in the Salt Lake Valley devastated the crops. The fields were saved from complete destruction as a flock of seagulls came and consumed the crickets. On December 9th, 1849, Sunday school was organized by Richard Bellantain. On June 15th, 1850, Desert News began a publication in Salt Lake City. In October 1856, Willie and Martin handcart companies were detained by early snowstorms found by a rescue party from Salt Lake Valley. December 8th, 1867, the Relief Society reorganized under the direction of President Brigham Young. November 28th, 1869, Young Ladies Retrenchment Association organized Forerunners of Young Women program. On June 10th, 1875, Young Men's Mutual Improvement Association organized the Forerunner of the Young Men program. St. George Temple was dedicated on April 6, 1877. President Brigham Young received revelation to set in order the priesthood organization and the stakes of Zion. On August 25, 1878, Aurelia Spencer Rogers held the first primary meeting in Farmington, Utah. October 10, 1880, John Taylor sustained a president of the church. The Pearl of Great Price was accepted as a standard work. On April 14, 1883, revelation to President John Taylor on the organization of the 70s. April 7, 1889, Wilford Woodruff sustained as the president of the church. October 6, 1890, the manifesto was sustained in General Conference, announcing the termination of the practice of plural marriage. On April 6, 1893, President Wilford Woodruff dedicated the Salt Lake Temple, 40 years in construction. On September 13, 1898, Lorenzo Snow became president of the church. May 17, 1899, President Lorenzo Snow received revelation in St. George, prompting him to emphasize tithing, VNC 119. On October 17, 1901, Joseph F. Smith became president of the church. On October 3, 1918, President Joseph F. Smith received the vision of the redemption of the dead, DNC 138. On November 23, 1918, Heber J. Grant became president of the church. On April 1936, the church security program instituted to assist the poor during Great Depression became the church's welfare program. This program grew out of a revelation received previously by Herbert J. Grant. April 6, 1941, assistance to the 12 first called. May 21, 1945, George Albert Smith became president of the church. April 9, 1951, David O. McKay sustained as president of the church. September 30, 1961, Elder Harold B. Lee, under the direction of the first presidency, announced that all church programs were to be correlated through the priesthood to strengthen the family and the individual. On October 1964, the observance of family, home, evening re-emphasized. January 23rd, 1970, Joseph Fielding Smith became president of the church. January 1971, new church magazines and Sign, New Era, and Friend commenced in publication. On July 7th, 1972, Harold B. Lee became the president of the church. December 30th, 1973, Spencer W. Kimball became president of the church. On October 3rd, 1975, President Spencer W. Kimball announced the reorganization of the first quorum of the 70. On April 3rd, 1976, 2 revelations were added to the Pearl of Great Price. In 1981, they were moved to become DNC 137 and 138. On September 30th, 1978, revelation sustained by the church granting the priesthood to every worthy male without regard to race or color. On August 1979, the Latter-day Saints edition of the King James Bible with the study aids was published. In September of 1981, new editions of the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price were published. In June of 1984, the area presidencies inaugurated with members called from the 70s. And November 10th, 1985, Ezra Taft Benson became president of the church. April 1st, 1989 was the second quorum of the 70 reorganized. On June 5th, 1994, Howard W. Hunter became president of the church. March 12th, 1995, Gordon B. Hinckley became president of the church. April 1st, 1995, the position of regional representation was discontinued. Announcement of new leadership position to be known as the Area Authority. On September 23rd, 1995, the family. It was a proclamation to the world from the First Presidency and Council of the 12 Apostles was published. On April 5th, 1997, area authorities to be ordained 70s, 3rd, 4th, and 5th quorums of the 70 announced. On October 4th, 1997, President Hinckley announced the building of smaller temples. November 1997, the church membership reached 10 million. And the last entry in this chronology was April of 1998, where President Hinckley announced the goal of having 100 temples in service by the year 2000.